early. Let's see here. Mixer is good, and I don't know. I don't know what the heck's going on. Everything is enabled, and it should be fine. So let's. I don't understand what's going on with this thing. Let's try it one more time. That still didn't work. Let's see if we can move this down and up. Get that going. Maybe if we cue it. And then try it. Oh, that didn't work. Let's see. What if we air it now and uncue it? Let's try that. There we go. Now we've got it cooking, and we're back to work, and we're going to get this thing going. I'm sorry for the delay. You know, this whole system is a little new to me, but I would guess that by Monday afternoon I ought to have it down pat. At least I'm certainly hoping that I'm going to have it down pat. That's what the plan is in any event. Let's go ahead and continue on with the news. Firms push high-tech solutions to fortify airport perimeters. Technology firms increasingly pitch new sensors and software to U.S. airports as a way to bolster exterior security and keep intruders out. But such digital barriers come with a hefty price tag and don't always work. An Associated Press investigation this week documented 268 instances in which people hopped over, crawled under, drove cars through, or otherwise breached the fences and gates protecting the perimeters of 31 of the nation's busiest airports from January 2004 through January 2015. How to address the problem is up for debate. There's a lot of things that can be done, said John Piscol, retired director of the Transportation Security Administration, who, like airport officials, argues the perimeters are secure and that breaches are rare. The question is whether there's an appetite for paying for it. Congressman Eric Swalwell, a Democrat from California, said the number of airport breaches over the past decade is cause for action and that new technologies should be installed on perimeters. Bringing down an airliner and killing innocent Americans remains our enemy's highest value target. Porous airport perimeters are major vulnerabilities that terrorists could exploit, he said. I'm continuing to call for airports to use technologies that would alert officials the moment a perimeter is breached. Well, I guess so, for Pete's sake, you know. Let's go ahead and let the whole world know that we have a hole in our security, right? Let's just make sure that if the terrorists don't know already, that we let them know that there's a way they can get through to us. How absolutely ridiculous is that? I have no clue for any of this. How about this one? An Associated Press news break. A census suspect pleaded guilty to manslaughter. A man charged in a crime spree that left a Census Bureau guard dead and a police officer wounded was previously convicted of manslaughter and recently was arrested in an assault case involving his visibly afraid girlfriend, according to court documents obtained today by the Associated Press. Ronald Anderson, 48 years old, was arrested February 17th on a charge of assaulting his girlfriend in the Washington, D.C. suburb of Prince George's County, according to court records. He was released the day of his arrest. The officer responding to a domestic dispute call said that the man's girlfriend, who was 20 years old, was clearly afraid. The victim was shaking, crying, and was whispering while speaking because she was afraid of the suspect hearing her, the officer wrote, according to the documents. The woman, whose 10-month-old son was home, told police that Anderson had hit her several times, knocking her into walls because he thought she was looking at another man, the records say. Another court record filed in D.C. Superior Court shows that Anderson pleaded guilty to manslaughter while armed in 1991 in Washington, D.C. No other details were immediately available about the case. So, gosh, you know, he's been pleaded guilty to manslaughter. God, you don't really believe he actually hurt this person, do you? Golly, no, he would never do a thing like that, I'm guessing. You know, how ridiculous is that? You know, it's just throw him in jail and throw him the key. That's what we ought to be doing. And one last one. Jordan Spieth sets the lowest 36-hole score in Masters history. Jordan Spieth made today feel like Sunday at the Masters. Fans rose to their feet and applauded when Spieth walked onto the 12th tee, and for the next 2 hours, ovations greeted him on tee boxes and greens. The red number next to his name on the leaderboard, 14 under par, was better than 11 of the last 13 winners. It was easy to forget the Masters was only half over. And the 21-year-old Texan tapped in for par in a 6 under 66. He broke the 36-hole record at the Masters that had stood for 39 years. Spieth was at 14 under 130, a two-day total match by only 3 other players in major championship history. And his 5-shot lead over Charlie Hoffman looked even longer, considering that Spieth was a runner-up in his Masters debut last year, and he came to Augusta this year as the hottest player in golf. Now, don't go away, because when we come back, it's going to be the IRS loses, and the first case up is failure to pay taxes was not willful. I'll tell you all about it right after these brief messages. Oh yeah, here we are, my favorite part of the show, the IRS losers. You know, this sends chills up and down my spine, sets the hair up on the back of my neck. I just love this section, so let's get right to it, because I know you're going to love it too. We could actually call this Business Winners Hotline, but it's actually the IRS losers. First case up, failure to pay taxes was not willful. Here's the case. A business owner who owed back taxes declared bankruptcy, but the IRS said his non-payment was willful because he had improved his home and bought a luxury car while his tax bill mounted. So it would not be discharged. So he went to court for some justice. This is what the judges actually had to say about it. The individual had income of more than $1 million and owed $5 million of stock on margin when the stock market crash of 9/11 attacks and the recession suddenly wiped out his stocks and cut his business income by 75%. He had committed to the personal expenditures earlier and had mistakenly believed that he could deduct his stock losses to offset his tax bill. There was no evidence of any wrongful attempt to avoid the taxes, so they absolutely are dischargeable and were. You know, the IRS, God, don't you just love it when the IRS loses? I know I do. Here's another case for you. IRS lost. They must pay for delaying a refund. Here's the case. Dino Grisanti entered an installment agreement with the IRS to pay taxes owed by a business that he had purchased and abided by the agreement. But the IRS seized a $17,000 refund owed to him anyhow. Grisanti went to court to get the refund and the IRS then paid it. Grisanti then asked to have the IRS pay his legal fees. The IRS answered to that, the award isn't justified because it had never rejected the refund claim and, in fact, paid it soon after the court filing. So he went to court for some justice. This is what the judge actually had to say. The IRS sat on that refund for 2 years, giving an excuse of the check is in the mail. And it seemed no coincidence that the refund was granted only after the court filing. So the fees are absolutely awarded in this case, and the IRS has got to send that check out immediately with interest, by the way. Let me give you the last one. The IRS concedes. Now, here's a case. When the IRS concedes, it's because they're pretty sure they can't win in court, and that's exactly what we're talking about here, the IRS conceding. In this particular case, a company owner can make restorative payments to a retirement plan. Let me tell you about it. An individual owned one company with 2 retirement plans in which he was the sole participant, and another company that he had many employees in the retirement plan. Here's the snag. The trustee of the latter plan embezzled a large amount from it. Federal regulators said that the owner was a fiduciary of the depleted plan who could face legal action as a result. Now, the remedy to this? To avoid government lawsuits, the owner proposed to transfer the assets in his own 2 retirement plans to the depleted plan as a restorative payment. The IRS ruling? The payment is permitted and will not be a contribution to the employee's plan, which would affect its status or their taxes. It is a taxable distribution, but he also gets an offsetting business deduction for it. And you know what? That is exactly the way it's supposed to be. Now, let's talk about inside the IRS. Wouldn't you love to be a fly on the wall when the IRS is doing things? Well, I know I sure would. And that's what we're talking about right now when we talk about inside the IRS. And first up, we're going to talk about volunteer preparer foul-ups. You know, according to a recently released report by the Treasury Inspector General, more than half of the tax returns prepared by federal government volunteers income tax assistance program during the last tax filing season were inaccurate. The Inspector General based his report on the results of a test sample of 36 tax returns. 22 of the 36 were found to contain errors. In recent years, the IRS has been criticized for delegating too much of its own responsibility to taxpayer service to volunteers who lack the experience to gather the proper information and apply the appropriate tax law. Here's the lesson for you. You get what you pay for. If you got it for nothing, guess what it's worth? Yeah. So I'll tell you what, how about this? What small business owners are going to jail for these days. You know, filing false payroll tax returns indicating smaller salaries, restaurant owners in particular, seem to be a good target for the IRS investigators. These businesses tend to have at least some employees who are on the books for a portion of their salaries with the balance of their compensation paid in cash. Now, the defense for this, there isn't any. There's no defense for this kind of stuff, and it can be mounted against the IRS to put together. All they got to do is put together